practical tips?
Yeah, so we have seen, obviously, since the 1970s, a pretty dramatic uptick in divorce. And so I think you have to be, if you're married, you have to kind of be thinking about, in a sense, sort of, what do I do to sort of protect my marriage from divorce? And then also, what do I do to sort of make it stronger and better? And I think about this in terms of 5 different C's. So the first C is about communion. About a kind of we before me mentality in your marriage. This is, I think, both kind of very practical. So things like, for instance, having a joint checking account is linked to actually better marital outcomes. Kind of it forces people to kind of see their finances as kind of a we thing, not a me thing, and to talk through financial difficulties and challenges in ways that hopefully are generally constructive. So that's sort of one idea on that front. But also in terms of on the emotional front for communion, I would definitely encourage couples to go on a regular date night. And mix it up. So doing novel things with your spouse, whether it's dancing or movies or going on a hike, whatever it might be, tends to engender a sense of romance, because there's something about novelty that is linked, I think, in a very profound way in our brains and in our hearts with a kind of more romantic experience. So that's one piece. The second C is about children, kind of recognizing that your marriage matters not just for you, but for your kids. And couples who have that sense that they're kind of engaged in enterprise to raise kids and then maybe help raise grandkids, I think are more likely to be flourishing with this kind of common project they're working on together as a couple. The third C is about commitment, kind of recognizing that you've got to protect your marriage. And that partly is about fidelity. So, one sort of negative example here is a very famous Republican governor, Governor Mark Sanford, who would go away every year with his sort of college buddies, I think it was, a bunch of guys, and they would kind of go do adventures. But these friends were not really kind of committed to fidelity. And so one trip he met this woman in South America, and, things went from there. And then that ended up, basically destroying his marriage. So the point constructively is sort of like picking your friends well and paying attention to kind of the norm of fidelity by having some degree of prudence in terms of how you relate to folks who might be attractive alternatives to your spouse. The fourth C is about cash, and it really relates to men in particular. We know that marriages where men are doing a decent job, at least in the workforce, are markedly less likely to end in divorce, whereas the woman's employment has no implication for divorce risk. So basically, kind of encouraging husbands, to be deliberate about, being good workers and kind of attending to their financial responsibilities on that front is still, even in 2022, important. This is based upon some Harvard research done by Sasha Kilowald. And the final C is about community. And we know that folks who have friends who are family-oriented are more likely to be flourishing in their marriages, and particularly friends who are religious. And think about this in terms of 3 different factors. What I'd call norms, people who kind of embrace norms like forgiveness, for instance, in marriage, often from a religious basis. Network, so being connected to other, for instance, religious friends is linked to better outcomes. And then we call in sociology nomos, a sense of like there's an order out there that is kind of superintending your life. And so when you confront things like unemployment, the loss of a loved one, or some other major trauma in your life, if you have a kind of a community and a nomos that sort of basically gives you a sort of what we call a sacred canopy in sociology that lends meaning to your difficulty and to your suffering, you're much more likely to successfully navigate it and not to see your marriage dragged down by this, this challenge, the slings and arrows of fate, so to speak. So those are kind of the 5 C's. Again, so it's communion, it's children, it's commitment, it's cash, and it's community are all factors that are linked to both stronger and more stable marriages in my research.
That's really valuable. There's 2 things I'd just like to
Sure.
Say that I really picked up on there. The first was forgiveness. We don't do it very well in our culture now.
Sure.
Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, in a conversation that I held with him before he tragically died, he said one of the things that's really destructive in our modern community now is the judgmentalism in this day of cancel culture. Say the wrong thing, whatever,
right,
and the judgment is very harsh. There's no mercy, there's no forgiveness.
Right.
It seems to me that family environments and marriages in particular, there are going to be mistakes, there are going to be misunderstandings. If there's no forgiveness, it's going to be very hard to keep the ship in good shape, isn't it?
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of wear and tear in any long-term relationship, particularly a marriage. And so if you don't have the capacity to kind of both acknowledge that you've messed up and to ask for forgiveness from your spouse, and then to have the capacity to extend forgiveness to your spouse, you're probably going to fail in one way or another. That is, you're going to have a miserable marriage or you're going to get divorced. So I think that, forgiveness is just absolutely essential to kind of picking yourself up again and helping your spouse pick themselves up again as well on a kind of daily or weekly, or regular basis in one way or another. Yep.
And the other thing, you've been very generous with your time, but just to close this off, but that you said that companionship.
Sure.
It strikes me that women are innately better at that than men, particularly once they've finished university and they go out into the workforce. Men tend not to be very good at keeping a few good, close, we'd say in Australia, mates around them.
Yes.
And I heard a fellow I know and respect, an older man, say that a lot of women had said to him throughout his working life, I wish my husband had more friends. And he made the observation that women are much better at it than men. But that women actually wish their husbands did have deep and meaningful relationships with a few friends.
Yeah, although I'd say it's important for both husbands and wives to have some good friends outside of the marriage. And these are friends, of course, who are there for the marriage as well, not friends who are going to kind of, basically from the sidelines throw rocks at the relationship. But having kind of other outlets, not kind of investing all of your emotional apples in the marital basket, but kind of being able to kind of see and seek out, other needs and interests with friends, I think is very valuable for both wives and husbands. And again, you're right. I think husbands have more difficulty doing that. So, but it's still very important.